2.
Miss Lee, I've read your book cover to cover, and I'm very curious. Do you just have an amazing memory for detail, or have you been keeping your memoirs all these years for this specific purpose?
No, I didn't keep any notes on it at all. This is strictly from memory, and it was like unrolling a tape of everything once I had it started.
Now, I understand you didn't have a ghostwriter or a collaborator. This was all done by yourself. Was it more difficult than you thought it was going to be?
No, I tried for a very few minutes to work with a collaborator, and we couldn't get the styles together. He was a very good writer, but it didn't work. So I said, I want to be a writer someday when I get old and gray, and and I want, to establish some credibility for writing. So this was my opportunity for that.
Now, many people that I have talked to who have written their autobiography say that it's a very emotionally draining experience. Was it that way for you?
Not really for me, because everything in there was so traumatic that I experienced it then. I digested it and forgave it and went on to the next thing. And so it really wasn't. It was, it's almost as though it happened to someone else.
Now, I know in your book you share so many personal stories, so many personal moments about your childhood, about marriage, about your illnesses. Was it almost a therapeutic type of a thing to remember it and write about it and get it out?
Well, I think it was, yes, because I came out feeling stronger and a little more serene, a little bit more loving. I was loving before, but I can show it now. I couldn't seem to show an audience, for example, how much I really care about them. And you get to love audiences when they treat you as well as audiences have treated me, It's just marvelous. And then after the performance, for instance, in New York just recently, at the ballroom, I had a reception line after each performance, not so much in between, because I did 2 shows a night, an hour, a little more than an hour each one. And it was so nice to be able to really say hello to these people and have them, I get to feel very close to them.
A lot of people have felt close to you, of course, over the years through listening to your music. It's nice to have a chance to meet them, I'm sure, in person. Tell me, what was the reason? What made you write your autobiography in the first place?
Well, I suppose it's really because it's the subject I knew the most about. Imagine.
Well, tell me about writing it, actually. Did you sit down and write it in spurts, or did you have moments where you just locked yourself away in a room and just wrote for hours and hours?
I did the latter, and in fact, I spent many, many nights. I would write all night long, and sometimes I would go through the next day if I was on a roll, as they say, and then I would just keep going. And I had a wonderful girl using the word processor for me, so that I'd turn in my longhand sheets, and I found myself like running and writing fast to keep up with her.
Well, one of the subjects in the book that I'm sure was extremely difficult for you to write about, you wrote about your childhood, the 11 years of beatings that you suffered under the hands of your stepmother. How did that affect you and your drive and your determination in later years?
Well, the key word there is drive. It did affect that. That was the main thing that I got from that. Was it really motivated me to make something of my life, to show this woman that my mother had taught me differently, and that I could be someone, And so drive is the word. That's the operative.
Was it difficult for you to share these things with the public? I'm sure it's very difficult to write about.
At first it was, because it was a little embarrassing. Some of the things were. The one about when you're 8 years old, I think that a lot of children go through that they try to commit suicide because they don't understand how wonderful life is, especially if you're under those conditions, and I never had any time to play. The one time I did have a time to play, do you remember the part about Ebby and I fell out of the manger,
Right.
and fell into the trough. So it made me appreciate a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I was a very heavy-spirited person, I think, but it was always controlled because I didn't dare do anything that was too bad, or I would have been beaten to death.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about after you left North Dakota and you went to Hollywood. You really lived the glamour life back during the golden years of Hollywood. What was life like back then? Who did you pal around with?
Well, there are quite a few of them in the book. Greg Boutzer was one of my favorite romances.
Mm-hmm.
And well, it's everyone that I've mentioned in there. Some of them I knew professionally working with them, but then some are friends. And one of my dearest friends, two of my dearest friends are Martha Scott and Mel Powell. I'm very fond of them. You remember Martha from Our Town?
Right.
And Mel, of course, was with Benny Goodman. So it was a natural tie-in. He's now Dr. Powell. He's a professor at Caltech, and he's writing classical music, serious music. And he still has his hand into jazz, though. Once in a while we get together and have a little session.
Well, I know that one of the people that you write about in the book is Frank Sinatra. You were one of the few people who have written about him in a very favored light. Can you tell me, why is he so dear to you?
Because he was so good to me.
Mm-hmm.
He always has been. And from the time I started with Benny, and he sort of nursed me out of the flu. And through the years, I've run into him, and then we became neighbors, and he's just been wonderful. And then when I was, with the heart problem, he was so concerned and so helpful to me.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you very quickly. You had mentioned a little bit about, well, a lot about your songwriting. What was it like for you being a songwriter in a day where there weren't very many lady songwriters around? What were the ups and downs of that?
Well, I didn't mention it at the time, and maybe that's why I didn't. Mm-hmm. I've often wondered why I didn't, because I used to talk about other, like Carole King and Melissa Manchester and people like that. I was always raving about them in my bio, and once in a while my musicians in the quintet would say, why don't you sing? I didn't know you wrote Where Can I Go Without You, or I didn't know you wrote Johnny Guitar, other things like that. And I'd say, I still have difficulty singing my own things.
No.
It's funny.
Let me ask you one last question, and if this is very uncomfortable, you certainly don't have to answer it, but I'm just very curious to get your side of the story concerning the lawsuit with Disney. Why are you suing Disney concerning Lady and the Tramp?
It's purely because I had a contract with a clause in it that did not allow them to sell video cassettes or any kind of recording or transcription without my permission. And there's quite a market there.
Certainly.
That they've covered, and it's so definite in my contract that I felt that it was quite unfair also that Sonny and I didn't get very much for writing the score. We got $1,000 to split. In other words, each of us got $500 for writing that score, and they've made millions and billions by now.
Right. Well, I certainly wish you luck with that and with this book. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.